Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fully Managed Podcast. Guto, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Shannon. Super excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you on. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so today we're going to start with a game. I think that this game I hope it'll be really fun for you. I think it's difficult to reimagine things out loud and not on paper or on a computer. So we'll see how this works. But
All
okay,
right.
so this game is called New Visions. So
Okay.
I want you to walk me through how you would reimagine a famous company's logo. Does that sound okay?
Yes, let's do
Okay,
it.
perfect. Okay. And if you are unfamiliar with any of these, please let me know. It's okay. I will just give you another one. There are many brands out there that we can reimagine. Okay. First, Gap.
Gap. So the game is how I would imagine a new logo for Gap.
Yes, a very Gap is a very standard one. So I thought this would be you can go wild with this one since it's
Okay.
very like plain.
I love how brands when brands have short names and sticky and easy to remember. And I also love how visually we can bring something that helps remember the name. So I would say for Gap, I would try to make the a gap between the G and the P. Maybe, maybe the letter A is a little lower, and then there's a gap between them in a sense of like people have
Huh.
to jump from G to P. I don't know why.
Oh, that's really smart. I didn't even think about that. I mean, like that's kind of. I mean, like it's almost self-explanatory, but at the same time, it's so smart because I would have never thought about that. Oh, that's crazy. I think that's a great one. Okay, okay.
Good.
The next one. The next one is Hulu.
Hulu. Wow. Okay, streaming platform. I love the colors. So green and black. Uh, I think there is something like celebratory on Hulu, like almost like Hulu. So I would make it a little more fun. I would keep the colors, uh, and maybe I'll play with the both letter U's. I think when I have repetition of letters, maybe I'll do letter U's maybe a little longer and taller. And then the L in the middle could look really cool too. Oh. So yeah, maybe this, if the whole word is a little more elongated, I think will look visually stunning because all of them are more vertical letters,
Yeah.
and I would make them like thinner and long.
Mm.
I don't know if there's not a reason. I just think would look cool.
I think that would look cool too because they are all letters that could be like stretched out because they're very
Yeah,
distinct. They don't have a lot of curves to them. They're
exactly.
all except for the U's, obviously. So,
Yeah,
but
and you can block them, put them a little more tight together. You make me feel like a crowded place
yes,
where you can have all the cool shows that you can watch.
yeah. Then it can be a whole homage, so to speak, to the places in which you can watch Hulu, and that they might be cramped. You might be on the
Yeah,
subway. You might be on the. I
but I,
really
I
like.
would I would keep the colors. I love the colors.
Yeah, I like the colors too. I think there's something that stand out. I think I do believe that there are so many logos that are too plain for me, like, I'm bored with
Hmm.
them, and they don't really stand out to me, but I think that a lot of brands get down the color scheme first, and I wish that they'd play more with, like, the font.
Yep.
I think that's always my biggest issue with, like, Netflix. They're just I don't know, I wish that I like, white, fine with that. I think it stands out, it's great, but I wish that they would do more with the font.
Yeah. 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 And I think when you have like a ownable color, you should embrace it and use it. And they actually did a lot. I think a lot of Hulu commercials they have like the full green background. But if you think about Netflix, the Netflix red is pretty similar to the Coke red,
Mhm.
Budweiser. There's a lot of brands who use that color. So I think they were pretty smart on the color choice.
Yeah, yeah, green and black is very good. The green is a really good contrast, I think. I like that a lot. I
Mhm.
think that it definitely stands out in comparison to other streaming services.
Yeah.
For example, like when I think of Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, I kind of group them all together in the idea that they weren't very creative with the way that they played
Mhm.
with their logo. Granted, Disney is like a household name, so it's like they're not gonna play
Yeah.
with their logo. But there's a lot of other brands that I wish they like, they could do more, be more funky. It wouldn't really be a detriment on to them. I think that it's different of like Coca-Cola. If you're a household name, people don't want to see change, but I think that
Yeah. You know a logo that I really love is the National Geographic. Because to me it says a lot. It's like a window to the world. And I love the yellow. I love how they contrast the graphic yellow window with like a beautiful scenery or view. I think they did pretty well. I hope they don't change. Like
yeah, I hope
a lot of times brands tend to change just
Mhm.
because, but I hope they keep that way.
Something that I think of anytime I think of rebranding a logo is Gushers. Do you
I
remember
don't
what they
remember.
used to look like?
Okay.
I think it's because the original
Uh,
logo felt like a very 90s feel, and they made it look really what's weird is that they made it look very retro now, but in a different way than what it was before, like,
mhm.
very different, and I don't think I've seen that stark of a rebrand in a really long time,
Yeah.
but that's something that I always think about. Is there any logos that you have in the back or in the front of your mind or the back of your mind, that you hate? Like, you you really don't like.
Um, I think Airbnb, I don't think they were too happy when they
Huh,
changed the logo.
I
Uh,
didn't even know they changed their logo now I wanna
they changed it a few years ago, but it was a big, a lot of people are talking about that. Uh, But I
Oh,
think,
so different.
yeah, because Airbnb, there's the thing of like a home everywhere you go, and I think you have a lot of opportunity to do something more homey and cozy or something
Yeah.
that they did a beautiful spot with birds houses. So I would say it's a great brief to create a logo for Airbnb. And I don't know, I don't think they were too happy with the latest logo, but they stick to it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did think that when looking at the new logo, I didn't even know there was an old logo, I'm gonna be so honest. I thought that I guess I never realized how long Airbnb has been around, I only recognized the new logo. But, um, I kind of think of it as kind of a home because it's like the A, it kinda looks like a almost
Yeah,
like a teepee maybe, and that's what I'm kind of thinking, like, it's like a little house. But
yeah.
I don't know if that's what they were going for, or that's just what I see in my brain.
But do you remember how was it before?
I thought it was I'm looking at pictures of it now. Is it just
Yeah, actually before it
ah
was even worse.
yeah, it was worse, right? That's what I'm saying. I think I didn't because it made it better before it was just what written now, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing with reading on logos too. Like I think when you have a global brand,
Mhm.
going for an icon, it makes a lot more sense because it's universal and recognizable. When you have your logo written out and then you go to places with different alphabets, I think there's always a cultural clash. So I think as your brand grows and start taking globally, and if you just have something written out, well, obviously there are brands like Gap that you mentioned that they always stick to the word, but but I would say having an icon, it makes your brand so much more recognizable.
Mm.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I think it's also difficult when you have a I think gap almost makes so much sense because even though it is a real word that is in the English language, I think that it is almost a made up word for them in a way because it's not supposed to mean gap like in the word of the English language. So I think that um brands that have, like, a made up word as their name, like Hulu, for example. I
Yeah.
think that can transcend,
Yes.
like, cultures because it's just an identifiable word that is not necessarily it has no meaning attached to it,
Yeah.
whereas, like, Airbnb is a word and then, like, I guess, um, an acronym, and so I feel like that doesn't transcend cultures, whereas like I agree that like an icon or a logo is something that's very helpful for people to identify something, whereas it's not as sticky when they're
Yeah.
looking at something that is, in a different language than they speak or in, something that just doesn't stick in their brain or
Yeah. I think that's great topic actually, because I think making up names is a way to go for new brands, because you can create a name that's your own and have a new meaning. And I agree, Gap maybe doesn't mean anything about Gap. Maybe they just think sounds cool and they
Mhm.
like the letters. Even like words like Nike or
Yeah.
like, I think they're all really successful brands that just made up their names. And when it comes to Netflix, uh, I don't think like when you combine names, but I I I would say that I really like Holo brand better because it's much more ownable. Netflix could mean different stuff. Could be like a cell phone operator, or could be something else. There's a good story about do you know the brand ice cream brand Haagen Dazs?
Yes.
So Haagen Dazs, because Belgian ice cream there's a lot of like fame around Belgian ice cream. They want to create a name that is on the flamenco language or Belgian language.
Mhm.
And then they came up with Haagen Dazs, but Haagen Dazs it's a made up name. It doesn't mean like ice
Know
cream.
that. I thought it was like
Yes,
someone's last name. I thought it was 2 last names that were just, like, put together. That's so
it doesn't mean
funny.
anything. They just came up with that. And I think that was genius because yeah, it feels like, oh, it's a family owned, like it
Yeah.
feels like important, it feels there's a lot of value to that. But
Mhm.
I think they were really smart about it.
Well, so speaking of, like, the different cultures and, like, how to create around making something, like, popular in all different spaces, you've worked in a lot of different areas, and so I'd love to hear how you think creative strategies have kind of evolved across cultures in your experience, or like what specific things stand out to you?
Yeah, I think I've been working as a copywriter from the beginning, but I work in a lot of different agencies and countries, and every time is a completely new experience because you learn from different people, you understand new processes, and then every experience you have, you build from the next, right? You learn a lot of things new that you carry with you, and then you learn how not to do things, uh, and then on your next like job or role, you kind of like gonna try to avoid those things. But I do think when you create for global brands, um, global projects, or it's a global audience, you need to have a global mindset. I
Mhm.
think you need to understand how those people live, how they behave, what they like to do. I think you need to be a well-traveled person. It would be important to live in different countries because I think that's where you really understand how people live in there. So I feel fortunate that had this experience, and I feel like really confident when I work in a global project because I can, even though I don't live everywhere, obviously, but you can point it out like how different cultures behave in different ways and how can you shape and adapt a message to them, and maybe it's a message that is not offensive or that is like culturally acceptable, or even when you go to humor, like some things we tend to start from the English language, but some things doesn't work really well when
Mhm.
you translate. So we always talk about transcreation, meaning like how can you get that and translate in a way that makes sense culturally. So you're not gonna translate literally because it's gonna sound weird. But not only that, like sometimes culturally maybe something is funny in the US and then in Brazil it's not that funny, or like maybe in Japan is offensive, or maybe in China then they never heard about, so there's all these nuances and difference, and I think having explored different areas and work in different places with different people from different nationalities, I think it helps get this like a more open-minded point of view.
Is this something that you enjoy kind of trying to crack the code of when you're going through this? Or is it something that you find, or maybe both, is something that you find very difficult to kind of please everyone, so to speak, sometimes?
Yeah, both. I really enjoy it. I think you need to have like a sensibility to understand how other people will receive that message. You need to research, obviously. AI helps a lot with that. Be honest, AI has been changing a lot the way I work because you can go and say like, uh, what a young teenager from South Korea would think about this, and AI can, and they can even like impersonate a young teenager from South Korea that likes video games, and you can have a conversation with that person, and you can get a lot of insights from that. Uh, but is in the same way, it's a big challenge for brands because it's hard to be creative when you have to craft a message that makes sense for everyone.
Mhm.
So when you go to a niche, a specific type of audience, you can go a little deeper on their behavior, and you can find new insights that people might not have. And if you have a big audience, you need to find insights that intersects with everyone and make sense for everyone. So it's always a little more shallow. So when you work in a global project, normally you don't tend to go super creative. I think it's a little more, the message is a little more shallow but understandable and easy to absorb and digest. When you go a little more niche with a really specific target audience, I think that's where the most creative insights come in, and you can explore different approaches. And obviously, this is not a rule. Like I've seen like big brands going super creative to talk with a bigger audience, but that's normally like through my experience. Normally, that's what happens.
That does make a lot of sense because I can understand that um putting a lot of creative effort into creating a campaign that will not resonate with a lot of the population in which you're trying to, you know, reach is just wasted effort almost. If and I think that so would you recommend if you were putting something out for, like, a very diverse audience that you would settle with something more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, more standard?
Yeah, yeah, sort of. I think first of all, to work with a diverse audience, you need to have a diverse team.
Mhm.
I think that's the first rule. Like if it's just like uh, a few people deciding what the message should be, and they are all come from the same place and live the same life and live in like their own bubble, they're not gonna break the bubble. So I
Mhm.
think you need to have a diverse team, people from different places with different ages, with different tastes or different stuff they like. And I think that's one of the great things about our job here is that uh even though you are the creative lead on the project doesn't mean that you have all the answers, right?
Yeah.
If I creating something for like a Gen Z and I have a team of young 20 something girls and they tell me like, man, this doesn't make sense for them. They they have more um like their word is more important than mine. I'm
Mhm.
I'm actually here to help guide and get their vision out, but it's not my role to say like, no, I don't think they think that way. I think they think a different way. So I think that's the first part. The second part I think is when you want to put a message out there, and obviously it depends of what the type of project we're working on. Sometimes it's like you are reworking a big global tagline for a big brand, right? I think that's really tricky because you not only need to please the stakeholders like your clients, the agency, the audience, and then goes to research. And then on the research, there is a lot of different people from different backgrounds that gonna talk about the line. And eventually, you're not gonna please everyone. It's like it's
Yes.
impossible to everyone to be happy with our line. So we need to make a decision of like where where you can take risk and where you should really listen to. But going back to your question, I don't know if it's standard is the right word because it's a little bit negative. Like if you are
Yeah, yeah.
creative and
I
then
think
you
that
create
was, like,
it,
lack of better term.
yeah, I would never say to my team like, let's create something more standard. I would say like, guys, let's try to understand um people's background and where they come from. I think if you write this way, it might be uh, it might be too much on the slang side for a brand that needs to be a little more serious. There's also these like brands have their own personas and languages and the way you talk about. So you cannot be like a schizophrenic and get a serious brand to do and have like a tagline that says slang because they want to connect to Gen Z. No, but your brand is like a serious brand. So you don't talk that way. Even though we're talking to a Gen Z audience, doesn't mean you
Yeah.
need to talk like a Gen Z, right? So there's also that. But I think I know I'm taking too long to answer your question, but I think when you go to a global approach, I think it's more like can you write something that everyone will connect and get it? You know?
Yeah, no, I when you were saying that, I actually was thinking of Nike because their tagline "Just do it" is something that very easily transcends, like, every like, if you translate that in every different language, it still says the same thing. Obviously, it might have to be, like, tweaked a little bit to,
Yeah.
make sense. Um, but I think that I get what you're saying in the idea that standard is not the word that I was looking for. But that, maybe simple or simpler is the best
Mhm.
and is a better word of the idea that
Yeah.
just do it, 3 words, is something that can't really be misunderstood, can't really
Yes.
be construed, um, can be translated very easily, and you can understand if it's, correct or not, just by
Yeah.
doing that. And I think that campaigns like that is something that is much more easier to deal with, whereas if you're involving, um, humor or something like that, you might have to reorient your campaign for every single country that you bring this campaign to, which might be a pain in the
Yes.
butt. It might be worth it if it's something that's really funny and really gonna work. Um, but I think that there's so much more research that goes into that, which is cool and probably really fun to do depending on who's doing it and if they do find that fun. But I think that it's also very difficult, time consuming, maybe um a lot of money. So I think that doing something that's more simpler
Yeah.
um that is more likely to please everyone and people working on the project, I think is
Mhm.
I get exactly what you're saying with that.
Yeah. Even when you do like a big global film for Coca-Cola, for example, that's gonna be everywhere. It's gonna be translated in I don't know 50 different languages. We when you start writing scripts, we avoid having dialogue
Mm.
because the moment you put dialogue, you first you're gonna have to translate it and you're gonna have to transcreate it, meaning maybe it's like a dialogue that's like there's a joke in there, and then you're gonna have to rethink how it works in so many different languages. And even like big countries like India or China, there's like different dialects inside that they want to
Mhm.
like in Hong Kong they speak Cantonese, the rest of China they speak Mandarin. So you even have to stretch between the regions. Like if you do Southeast Asia, you're gonna have to think about how it works in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Mongolia. Like there's a lot of different countries in the region too. So it's really tricky. So we try to find like a, maybe something more visually stunning, maybe a narrative that you can show visually, and this way you can connect with more people without having the language barrier.
Yeah, I think that ideal campaign that would go global is something that transcends culture and transcends language. And it totally makes sense to me for brands like Nike, again, for example, to have thinking back on a bunch of their commercials, a lot of them don't involve sound. Like it involves like a runner or it involves like a
Yeah,
scene, but there's no other than maybe like huffing and puffing from
yeah,
the or whatever it may be. Like it's sounds that transcend cultures, like this is something that just human does rather than this is something that this type of human does. And I think that that is something that people are looking for when they're trying to advertise or they're trying to create is resonating with an audience no matter who they are or where they're from.
Yep, yep. And going back to Nike, I love that you brought it up. Just do it because it's maybe the best tagline ever created,
Yeah.
together with Think Different. But but I think there's also like the way you work a tagline throughout the years and how it constructed and became pop culture. I can feel that right when they created that, there's a lot of people saying no to them or
Yeah. Too
didn't,
simple or that's just stupid.
yeah, or didn't get it. I'm sure if they have done research, I'm sure people like raise their hands like, I don't get it. Why just do it? Like I want to think about that. There's always that. But I love they stick to it. And today, when you say just do it, people know it because they've seen what Nike had been doing throughout the years and become part of culture. Like people say it, just do it, and maybe because they heard from a Nike spot. Which that's why I think there's an important role that brands play in society, which is they become part of conversations, of part of the way we express ourselves or how we feel like empowered to do something that we probably wouldn't do it if you haven't seen the Michael Jordan Nike spot. So I kind of love that, and I think that's something we try to achieve when we work with big global brands, but it's something that is extremely difficult because you need to have first a brave client that gonna say no, I want to stick to it no matter what research and stakeholders and audience says, and then you need to have amazing creative that touch people's hearts, grab them in emotional way, make them feel something and remember that, and they need to stick to it, right? Coca-Cola is example, like they changed their tagline so many
I
times.
don't even know what Coca-Cola's tagline is.
So yeah, nowadays
Probably have
it's
one.
real magic. It's real magic today. But
Ah,
but that's just to show like how it's hard to have one single message throughout so many years, especially when society and the world around us is changing so fast, and you want to adapt and keep up to the speed of culture, right? You need to be ahead. That's I think this shows even more so how Nike was so successful when they came
mhm.
up with Just Do It.
Yeah, it's really very difficult to have something that will stick for so long and
Yeah.
still be, um, something that not only resonates with people, but is also, like, still culturally appropriate sometimes. I think that there's a lot
Yeah.
of I'm sure there's a lot of taglines that were out 20, 30 years ago that are not okay to be taglines now.
What's
Um,
in your wallet?
yeah,
Mhm.
and yeah, there's so many, and I think Nike did that perfectly with simplicity, which is something
Yeah.
that I think I can definitely understand what you said about there were probably a bunch of people that were like, I don't get it because it is so simple of that it's just in action. Like it's just telling you to just do it.
Mhm.
It's or a command, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's something that not only resonates with, like, the average person of, like, an inspirational tagline, but it's so perfect for the world of sports
Mhm.
because it resonates with every person that maybe is using Nike gear or is doing this or doing that because this is something that they can use as inspiration rather than just, I think that a lot of taglines are um, maybe more I don't know how to put this, but maybe more persuasive or, like, maybe trying to make you think
Sally?
of purchasing the brand rather
Yeah.
than, or, like, gimmicky, whereas the Nike, um, slogan is more geared towards, being like an inspirational tool.
Mhm.
And I think that that is something that's so unique about it as well is the idea that they didn't it feels like they're not trying to get you with the tagline. It's just something that people look towards the brand of like, "Oh, they're looking out for me," kind of thing.
Yeah,
Which
no, I agree with you, but there is also like that when I was working with New Balance a few years ago, we found a lot in research that there was a lot of people who didn't resonate with that message because for them sports wasn't about just doing it or about competition or about winning or getting better. Sport was more about something that they feel good with themselves and they just enjoy it, and doesn't matter their results or what time they finish the race. They just want to finish. You know, they want to have a running group not because they want to run faster, it's because they like the community building and making friends. So New Balance tries to go a slightly different way. And there's a lot of people that love New Balance because they don't want to wear Nike or Adidas, especially in Asia. There's a lot of people that because everyone is wearing Nike, they don't want to wear the same shoes. So they pick a different brand. And in a lot of cases, they chose New Balance, especially on the lifestyle part of it. But I think that you see, like even though like one of the best taglines and brand building from all time, there's people that maybe don't resonate with them, and they're gonna choose someone else, and that's all good. I think you shouldn't try to embrace everyone. I think you need to find your own audience and make something that connects with them.
yeah, I agree. I think that New Balance is definitely a great example of kind of going out of the box a little bit with that because
Mhm.
there is of course, if they're making a lot of um like anything that like athleisure or athletic wear or anything like that, obviously they're the assumption is that they should be more similar to brands like Nike that are kind of very in your face about being in that space. Whereas
Mhm.
there's been this I think a very like a very weird switch of that a lot of for athleisure specifically where a lot of people that aren't um being
Yeah.
actively athletic all the time are wearing athletic clothes
Yes.
because they feel comfortable in it, and going with that angle is very smart. And also, I think some people like to be in comfortable clothes and wear sneakers that are stylish but not um be associated with a brand that's around sports because they don't want to seem like they're a poser or so to
Yeah.
speak, something like that. And having your brand oriented around almost acceptance of that, like that um this is not just a brand for, top runners in the US or whatever it may be. This is something that's kind of for everyone is a really
Yeah.
great approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And people resonate with it. Doesn't mean that they do it, but it means that they they embrace it and use the lifestyle at like its own. Like for example, we also found out that there's a lot of people that wake up and put gym clothes and don't go to the gym. Or eventually go like in the end of the day, or maybe like skip 2 days. But it's because they put in gym clothes, talks about who they are. It's like it's the way they identify themselves and express themselves, you know. And you don't need to have like a six pack or to run marathons to wear gym clothes. But maybe you feel that you belong to those people who wear gym clothes, and you feel connected and you feel better with yourself. And I think that's great. I think you that's what brands should do to people as well. Like they should help them connect with their communities, find their own identity, and be themselves.
I think that is a beautiful note to end on because it's very wholesome and inspirational. I hope that I do really agree with that though. I think that brands should think more about that, like their impact almost rather than maybe reaching the most amount of people. Obviously everyone cares about volume and making money, but I think that I wish more brands were catering to acceptance and like community because that is something that's really wonderful. I hope I see more of.
Yeah, and ultimately, the best way to sell more is by creating these meaningful relationships with your audience, because that's when they're gonna remember you. Next time they're gonna go to Foot Locker and see all those brands, they're gonna remember like the brand that resonates the most with you, and they're gonna choose because of that. Of course, price is a big deal. Color, like you want a purple shoes and that brand doesn't have a purple color, is a big deal. But I think by connecting with people in a meaningful way, and make them feel like seen, and make them feel that they have a space, and it's a way for them to express themselves and be themselves. I think this way brands can build this relationship, and have customers for life, you know, and people gonna stick to it. That's also something you see. Like people love brands and they stick to their brand, and they like to have their own brand. You know, they like to. I know I'm a Nike person or I'm a New Balance person. They love that, but to achieve that is a challenge. So I think the moment you have that, then you just like keep working with this community and these people, because the moment they fell in love, they stick with the brand.
Yeah, when people really, I think, resonate with a brand or even their mission or what they
Um,
put out there, I think they're much more likely to be a loyal customer.
yes.
Um, Especially if another brand is contradictory to that mission, in which they're more likely to, rely on you and your products rather than another one.
Yeah, especially now with sustainability being a hot topic for everyone. People want to know where the brands source their materials, if it's sustainable or not, if their employees are well paid, if they are treated well, if the way they produce the their products is environmentally conscious, if what they do with the byproduct, if they just throw away, if they recycle. I think this is all uh, good insights for your brand's narrative, and to put into your communication, so people can see what you're doing and fall in love with the brand. Especially in the shoe category, like there's a lot of brands coming with like a really sustainable background, where they source from the leather, the rubber, the cotton in a great sustainable way, helping communities. And then they're putting that in their product, and obviously the product is gonna cost a little more, uh, but people are buying. They are choosing to spend a little more money for a brand that's sustainable conscious, instead of a brand that maybe don't care about that. So I think that's also a good advice for brands in general. Think about your whole story, because people are noticing, and I think and when you notice what you do, and see that all the work that you put behind, they pay the price, the cost that comes with it.
Yeah, and I hope that that's something that people continue to keep in mind for the future, because obviously I think that specifically the US has strayed a lot away from sustainability and
Yeah.
not caring about a lot of things, but I think that the more that gets out there and the more people find out about what's happening, maybe change will happen. So yeah, I think that that is a really great sentiment to end on, because we're a little bit over time, but that just means it was a really great conversation. I had such a great time with
Me
you. Thank
too.
you so much.
Thank you very much, Shannon. I also have a great time. I I think we could be here talking all day, to
We
be
could.
honest.
We could. I
I
would.
really love it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for inviting me again.
I appreciate it. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope that you got a lot out of this as much as I did, and that, you take away some of these sentiments of sustainability and also just resonating with community. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.